The village of Amapu did not appear on most maps. It was the kind of place people passed through without remembering. A scattering of mud huts and rusted zinc roofs surrounded by stubborn earth that only yielded crops when it felt generous. The roads were not roads at all, just narrow dusty paths carved by years of bare feet and worn sandals. In the dry season the land cracked open like it was tired of holding itself together. In the rainy season it turned into a thick clinging mud that swallowed slippers and slowed even the strongest men. But to those who lived there, Amapu was home. And to one girl in particular it was everything she had left. Her name was Amara. At 23 years old, she carried herself with a quiet strength that didn't match her circumstances. Her frame was slim from years of eating just enough to survive. Her dark skin kissed by the sun, her palms rough from labor. Her clothes, usually a faded wrapper and an old blouse, were carefully washed but worn thin, patched in places where the fabric had given up long ago. Yet there was something about her that made people look twice. Not beauty in the loud attention-grabbing sense, but something softer, something steady. The kind of presence that felt like calm in the middle of chaos. But calm did not mean easy. Amara's life had never been easy. She had been 10 years old when sickness first entered their home. It started with her mother. First it was just a cough, then fever, then weakness so heavy it seemed to pin her to the mat she slept on. The village healer came with herbs and chants, and for a while it seemed like things would get better. They didn't. Amara remembered sitting beside her mother holding her hand as it grew colder by the day. "Be strong, my daughter," her mother had whispered, her voice thin but filled with love. "No matter what happens, you must not let the world harden your heart." Amara didn't understand then. She thought strength meant not crying. She learned later that strength meant surviving even when you wanted to give up. Her mother died 3 days later. The hut felt empty in a way Amara could not explain. The silence was louder than any sound. Her father tried. He really did. He worked longer hours on the farm, took on extra labor, did everything he could to keep food on their table. But grief is a quiet thief. It doesn't break the door down. It seeps in, slowly taking pieces of you until there's nothing left to fight with. He stopped laughing, stopped singing, stopped talking except when necessary. Sometimes Amara would catch him staring into nothing, his eyes distant, like he was searching for something he could never get back. Then, one evening he didn't come home. They found him the next morning near the farm. Some said it was his heart. Others said it was sorrow. Either way, he was gone. That was the day Amara became invisible. Not literally, of course. People saw her. They just didn't see her. At first the villagers tried to help. An elderly woman gave her food for a few days. A neighbor let her sleep in their hut for a week. But kindness in Amapu had limits. Everyone was struggling. Everyone had their own burdens. Eventually the help stopped, and Amara was left alone. Her parents' hut, small and fragile, became her responsibility. It leaned slightly to one side, like it might collapse if the wind blew too hard. The roof leaked during heavy rain, forcing her to move her mat from one corner to another in the middle of the night. But it was hers, and she refused to let it fall. Each morning before the sun fully rose, Amara would wake up. Not because she wanted to, but because survival did not wait. She fetched water from the river, balancing a clay pot on her head with practiced ease. She gathered firewood from the edges of the forest, careful to avoid snakes and thorny bushes. Some days she worked on other people's farms, earning a small portion of food instead of money. Other days she helped carry goods in the market. On the worst days she went hungry. There were moments when the hunger felt unbearable, moments when her stomach twisted so painfully she had to sit down and press her hand against it, breathing slowly until the feeling passed. But even then she never begged. Not because she was proud, but because she remembered her mother's words. Do not let the world harden your heart. She didn't fully understand them, but she held on to them like they were the last piece of her mother she had left. The other villagers had their opinions about her. She's too quiet. Some would say, she keeps to herself too much. Others added. A few were kinder. That girl is strong. An old man once said, stronger than most. But strength did not make life easier. It only made it bearable. Despite everything, Amara had one place she went to escape: the river. It lay just beyond the edge of the village, where the land dipped slightly and the air felt cooler. Tall grasses swayed gently along its banks, and the sound of flowing water created a rhythm that calmed the mind. To others it was just a source of water. To Amara it was something more. It was where she could breathe. Every evening after the day's work was done, or when there was no work at all, Amara would walk to the river, sometimes barefoot, sometimes with worn-out slippers that had lost their shape. She would sit on her usual spot, a flat rock, near the edge, and watch the water move. Always moving, always going somewhere. She envied that. Where are you going? She would sometimes whisper, her voice barely louder than the breeze. The river never answered, but she liked to imagine it carried stories from faraway places, places where life was different, better, kinder. On one particular evening, the sky was painted in shades of orange and gold, the sun slowly sinking as if it, too, was tired from the day. Amara sat on her rock, her knees pulled close to her chest. She had eaten nothing that day, not because she didn't try, but because there was nothing to eat. Still, her face did not show bitterness, only quiet thought. I wonder, she murmured softly, staring at the water, if my life will always be like this. The question hung in the air, unanswered. She picked up a small stone and tossed it into the river. It disappeared instantly, just like her voice felt sometimes, lost, unheard. A group of young women passed behind her, laughing loudly. They were dressed in brighter clothes, their hair neatly braided, their energy full of life. One of them glanced at Amara and smirked. Still talking to the river, she said mockingly. The others laughed. Amara didn't turn, didn't respond. She had learned long ago that some words were not worth answering. Their laughter faded as they walked away. Silence returned. Amara exhaled slowly and rested her chin on her knees. Maybe one day. She whispered again, softer this time. Something will change. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't even hope. It was more like a quiet wish. Fragile, uncertain, but still alive. The wind picked up slightly, brushing against her skin. The river flowed as it always did. Unbothered, unstoppable. What Amara didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that her life was already standing at the edge of change. That somewhere not far from where she sat, fate was shifting, moving pieces into place, preparing something she had never imagined. Because sometimes life doesn't change slowly. Sometimes it waits, and then changes everything in a single night. Amara stayed by the river until darkness began to settle. Then she stood, dusted off her wrapper, and began the walk back to her hut. The path was quiet. The village was settling. Cooking fires flickered in the distance. The smell of food filled the air, reminding her again that she had none. Still, she kept walking, step by step, just like she always had. That night, as she lay on her thin mat, staring at the weak light filtering through the cracks in her roof, She placed a hand on her chest. Her heartbeat was steady, strong, alive. No matter what, she whispered into the darkness, echoing her mother's voice. I will keep going. Outside, the wind began to rise. The trees swayed, and far away the river flowed louder than usual, as if it was preparing to tell a story that would begin with a cry for help. The wind did not sound normal that night. It wasn't the gentle whisper Amara had grown used to, the kind that brushed against the skin and carried the scent of earth and firewood. This wind howled. It rattled the loose edges of her hut. It slipped through the cracks in the walls, like something searching, something restless. Amara lay on her thin mat, staring into the darkness. Her stomach was still empty, but hunger was no longer what kept her awake. It was the sound, the uneasiness. Something about the night felt wrong. She turned to her side, pulling her wrapper tighter around her body. Sleep, she whispered to herself. You need to sleep. But sleep refused to come. The wind grew louder. The trees outside creaked and swayed. Then a sound cut through everything. Faint, broken, almost swallowed by the storm. Help! Amara's eyes snapped open. She held her breath. Silence. Only the wind again. She frowned slightly. Maybe I imagined it, she muttered. It wouldn't be the first time her mind played tricks on her when she was tired. She closed her eyes again. Then, help. This time louder, clearer, desperate. Amara sat up immediately. Her heart began to pound. That wasn't the wind. That was a voice. For a moment she hesitated. Every instinct told her to stay inside. It was dark. The storm was building. And no one in Amapu wandered outside at this hour, especially not near the river. But the voice came again, weaker this time, like it was slipping away. Please. Amara swallowed hard. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. Do not let the world harden your heart. She pushed herself to her feet. I'm coming, she shouted, though she wasn't sure the person could hear her. Grabbing a small lantern and a long wooden stick she used for support during heavy loads, she rushed out into the night. The air hit her like a wall. Cold, sharp. The wind whipped her wrapper around her legs as she struggled to move forward. The path to the river, so familiar during the day, felt different now. Longer, darker, uncertain. Her lantern flickered violently, the flame dancing as though it might die at any second. Hold on, she shouted again, her voice trembling but determined. Don't stop shouting. But there was no reply. Only the roar of the river growing louder as she approached. When she reached the riverbank, she froze. The calm, steady water she knew had transformed into something wild. The current was fierce, churning, crashing against rocks with angry force. The surface glistened under flashes of lightning, revealing waves that twisted and surged like they had a life of their own. Amara's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't the river she sat beside every evening. This was something else entirely. Dangerous, unforgiving. Then she saw him. A figure, half submerged, being dragged by the current. A man. Hey, Amara screamed, dropping the lantern onto the ground. The light rolled slightly, casting wild shadows around her. The man's head disappeared under the water for a moment, then surfaced again. He gasped, choking. His movements were weak, uncoordinated. He was losing strength, losing time. Amara's mind raced. What do I do? She couldn't swim well. Not in a river like this. If she jumped in, they would both die. Her eyes darted around desperately. Think. Then she remembered the stick in her hand. Without wasting another second, she ran along the edge of the river, trying to match the man's movement as the current dragged him downstream. Hold on, she shouted, her voice nearly lost in the wind. Don't give up. She reached a point where the bank dipped slightly closer to the water. It was her chance. Dropping to her knees, she stretched the stick out as far as she could. Grab it. She screamed. The man's eyes were barely open. His face was bruised, his lips trembling, his body clearly on the verge of giving up. For a terrifying second, he didn't move. "Please," Amara cried, her voice breaking. "Don't die." Something in her tone, raw, desperate, human, reached him. With the last bit of strength he had left, the man lifted his arm. His fingers brushed the stick, slipped, then gripped it. "Yes," Amara gasped. But the moment of relief was short-lived. The current pulled hard. So hard that the force nearly dragged the stick and Amara with it into the river. Her body lurched forward violently. Her knees dug into the muddy ground as she struggled to hold on. "Don't let go," she shouted, her arms shaking under the strain. The man's weight combined with the rushing water felt impossible. Too heavy, too strong. For a moment, doubt crept in. "I can't do this." Her hands began to slip. The stick creaked under pressure. The river roared louder as if mocking her effort. Then something inside her shifted. A stubborn fire. The same one that had kept her alive all these years. "No," she whispered through clenched teeth. "Not today." She tightened her grip, planted her feet deeper into the mud, and pulled. Inch by inch. Pain shot through her arms. Her muscles screamed. Her breath came in sharp, uneven bursts. But she didn't stop. Wouldn't stop. "Come on," she whispered. "Come on." The man's body dragged against the edge of the bank, the current still fighting to pull him back. But Amara pulled harder. With everything she had, every ounce of strength, every piece of will, every memory of loss, she refused to repeat. And then, with one final desperate pull, he broke free. The man collapsed onto the muddy ground beside her. Still silent, Amara fell backward, gasping for air. Her entire body trembled. For a moment she couldn't move, couldn't think, could only breathe. Then reality hit her. She scrambled toward him. "Hey," she said urgently, turning him slightly. "Hey, can you hear me?" No response. Her heart dropped. "No, no, no." She placed her ear close to his chest. There. A heartbeat. Weak, but there. Relief flooded through her so suddenly it almost made her cry. "You're alive," she whispered. Lightning flashed again, illuminating his face clearly for the first time. He was not from the village. That much was obvious. Even in his current state, his clothes, though torn, were made of fine material. His hands were smooth, not the hands of a farmer or laborer. His features carried a kind of refinement she had only seen from afar when wealthy visitors occasionally passed through neighboring towns. Who was he? And what was he doing here? It didn't matter. Not now. Amara stood, her legs shaky but determined. "I can't leave you here," she said softly, looking around at the raging river. She knew one thing for certain. If she walked away, he would die. With effort, she pulled one of his arms over her shoulder. He was heavy, much heavier than anything she was used to carrying. But she adjusted her stance, took a deep breath, and began to move, step by step, slow, unsteady, painful. The journey back to her hut felt longer than it ever had before. The wind fought her. The ground slipped beneath her feet. More than once she almost fell. But each time she steadied herself and kept going. "Stay alive," she murmured to him as she walked. "You didn't fight that hard just to die now." By the time her hut came into view, her body felt like it was on fire. Her arms ached, her back screamed. Her legs threatened to give out. But she pushed through. Finally, she reached the door, kicked it open gently, and guided him inside. The moment she lowered him onto the mat, She collapsed beside him, breathing heavily. For a few seconds, neither of them moved. The storm raged. Outside. Inside, there was only the sound of two lives hanging in the balance. Amara turned her head slightly and looked at him. At the stranger the river had delivered into her life. At the man she had almost lost before even knowing his name. She didn't know it yet, but this moment, this night, this decision to step into the storm would change everything. Outside, the river continued to roar, as if it knew something she didn't, as if it had just given her a secret, and that secret was only just beginning. The storm did not leave quickly. It lingered through the night like an unwelcome guest, rattling the fragile walls of Amara's hut, and dripping steadily through the small gaps in the roof. The wind had softened, but the rain remained, steady, patient, almost rhythmic. Inside the hut, however, there was a different kind of silence, a fragile one, the kind that sits between life and uncertainty. Amara lay on her side for only a few minutes before forcing herself to sit up again. Her body screamed in protest. Every muscle ached from the struggle at the river. Her arms felt heavy, her palms raw from gripping the stick, her legs trembling from the long walk back. But she ignored it. Her eyes moved to the man lying on the mat, still unmoving, still unconscious, still breathing. She crawled closer to him, her movements slower now, more careful. In the dim glow of her lantern, now steadier, resting on the floor, she studied his face properly for the first time. He looked different, not just because he was a stranger, but because everything about him seemed out of place in her small, worn-down hut. His features were sharp, but calm, even in unconsciousness. His skin was smooth, untouched by the harshness of constant outdoor labor. His hair, though now damp and slightly disheveled, was neatly cut in a way she rarely saw in the village. Even his clothes, though soaked, torn, and stained with mud, were clearly expensive. Amara reached out hesitantly and touched the sleeve of his shirt. The fabric alone told her everything. This man does not belong here. She pulled her hand back quickly, almost as if she had crossed an invisible line. For a brief moment, doubt crept in. What if he's dangerous? What if the people who chase him are still looking? What if helping him brings trouble? Her eyes lingered on his face, bruised, exhausted, vulnerable. She exhaled slowly. No, she whispered to herself. He needed help, and that was enough. Carefully, she shifted closer and began checking his body for injuries the way her mother had once taught her. Her mother had not been a doctor, but in a village like Amapu, knowledge of herbs and basic healing was survival. Amara gently rolled him slightly to one side. He groaned faintly. She froze, then leaned closer. "Can you hear me?" she asked softly. No response, but the sound gave her hope. She noticed cuts along his arm, small, but deep enough to need cleaning. There was a bruise forming near his temple, darkening by the minute. His breathing, though steady, was shallow, like his body was still fighting to recover. Amara stood slowly and moved toward a small clay pot in the corner of the hut. Inside was water she had fetched earlier that day. She poured some into a smaller bowl, then reached for a piece of clean cloth, one of the few she had managed to keep in good condition. Returning to his side, she dipped the cloth into the water and began cleaning his wounds. The first touch made him flinch slightly. "Sorry," she murmured instinctively. She worked gently, carefully, every movement deliberate as she cleaned the mud and blood from his skin. She couldn't help but notice how foreign everything about him felt in her hands. Not in a bad way, just unfamiliar. "Who are you?" she whispered under her breath, more to herself than to him. The rain tapped steadily against the roof as time passed. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, but Amara didn't stop. After cleaning his wounds, she stood again and moved toward a small bundle hanging near the wall. Inside were dried leaves, bitter herbs her mother had taught her to use for healing. She crushed them carefully in a small wooden bowl, adding a bit of water until it formed a paste. The smell was strong, earthy, sharp, familiar. Returning to him, she applied the paste gently to his cuts. "This will help," she said softly, as though he could hear her. When she finished, she sat back on her heels and studied him again. His breathing seemed a little stronger now, his body less tense. Relief washed over her quietly, but then her stomach growled loud, unapologetic. Amara let out a small, tired laugh. "I guess I can't ignore you forever," she muttered. She turned her head toward the small corner of her hut, where her cooking items were kept. There wasn't much. There was never much, but tonight she had just enough. Slowly, she stood and made her way to the corner. She picked up a small yam she had been saving. It wasn't big, not enough for two people, maybe not even enough for one. She paused, looked back at the man, then at the yam. For a brief moment she hesitated. Hunger tugged at her hard, persistent. Then she sighed softly and made her choice. "All right," she said quietly, "we'll share." She lit the fire, carefully shielding the small flame from the draft that slipped through the hut. The fire caught slowly, then steadily, casting a warm orange glow that pushed back the darkness. She peeled the yam with practiced hands, sliced it into pieces, and dropped them into a small pot of water. From another small container she added pepper, pinch of salt, and the bitter leaves she had gathered earlier. It wasn't a rich meal. It wasn't even a proper one, but it was warm and it was made with care. As the soup began to simmer, the aroma filled the hut, simple, comforting, alive. Amara sat beside the fire, her arms wrapped loosely around her knees as she waited. Her eyes occasionally drifted back to the man, still unconscious, still silent. "You chose a strange place to end up," she murmured softly. The fire crackled gently. The storm outside softened further, and for the first time that night the world felt a little less tense. After a while, the soup was ready. Amara poured it into a small bowl and set it aside to cool. She stood and walked back to him again, knelt beside him, studied his face. "Hey," she said, gently reaching out to touch his shoulder. "Can you hear me?" For a moment, nothing. Then faint movement. Her eyes widened. "Hey," she said again, a little more hopeful now. His fingers twitched slightly. His brows furrowed, and slowly, very slowly, his eyes began to open. They were unfocused at first, clouded, confused. He blinked once, twice. His gaze shifted slightly until it landed on her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Amara felt her breath catch. "Where?" He croaked, his voice dry and weak. "Am I?" She leaned closer, her voice soft, steady. "You're safe," she said. "You're in my home." He blinked again, trying to process her words. His eyes moved around the hut slowly. The walls, the fire, the dim light. Confusion flickered across his face. He tried to speak, but his voice failed him. "Don't talk yet," Amara said quickly. "You're weak." She reached for the bowl of soup and brought it closer. "You need to eat something." He looked at the bowl, then back at her. For a brief moment, something unreadable passed through his eyes. Surprise, disbelief, gratitude. "You saved me," he whispered. Amara shook her head slightly. "I just helped," she replied. But deep down she knew it had been more than that. Carefully she helped him sit up, slightly supporting his back with her arm. He winced faintly. "Slowly," she said. She lifted the bowl gently and held it toward him. "Drink." He hesitated for only a second before taking a small sip. The warmth seemed to bring him back to life little by little. He took another sip, then another. Amara watched him quietly. Something about the moment felt strange, not uncomfortable, just important. Two strangers from completely different worlds sitting in a small hut sharing a simple meal. Neither of them fully understood it yet, but something had begun, something neither of them would ever be able to undo. As the fire crackled softly between them, and the last echoes of the storm faded into the night, Amara realized something. For the first time in a long time, she was not alone. And for the man she had pulled from the river, this was the night stretched on quiet, warm, uncertain, and somewhere in that silence 2 lives began to change. The rain had softened into a whisper, no longer fierce, no longer angry, just a steady rhythm against the roof, like the night itself was calming down after a long struggle. Inside the hut the fire burned low but steady, its glow painting the walls in soft orange light. Amara sat close to it, one knee drawn to her chest, her chin resting lightly against it. Across from her, the stranger now, awake, leaned against the wall, his body still weak, but slowly recovering. Between them sat the empty bowl, a simple meal, but somehow it had changed everything. For a while neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was careful, like two people standing at the edge of something new, unsure of how to step forward without breaking it. The man shifted slightly, wincing as he adjusted his position. Amara noticed immediately. "Are you in pain?" she asked softly. "A little," he admitted, his voice still rough but stronger than before. "But I felt worse." Amara gave a small nod. "That's good," she said. "It means you'll live." A faint smile touched his lips. It was brief but real. He studied her then properly, not just as the person who saved him, but as someone intriguing. She didn't look like anyone he knew. There was no polish, no pretense, no calculated behavior. Everything about her was natural, unfiltered, honest. "You haven't told me your name," he said after a moment. Amara hesitated, as though the question carried more weight than it should. "Amara," she said finally. He repeated it quietly, as if testing how it felt. "Amara." Then he nodded slightly. "It suits you." She frowned just a little. "What does that mean?" He glanced at the fire, then back at her. "It means it feels strong," he said, "like someone who doesn't give up easily." Amara didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked down at her hands. Rough, calloused, marked by years of survival. "I didn't have a choice," she said quietly. That answer lingered in the air longer than expected. He leaned his head back slightly against the wall. "I guess none of us really do," he murmured. Silence settled again, but this time it felt heavier, closer. After a while, Amara looked up again. "You said something earlier," she said, "before you slept." He turned his head slightly toward her. "What did I say?" "You said you were kidnapped." His expression changed subtly but unmistakably. The softness in his face faded, replaced by something darker, something guarded. For a moment, Amara thought he wouldn't answer, that maybe she had asked too much, but then he exhaled slowly and spoke. "Yes," he said, "I was." The fire crackled softly between them. "They took me outside my office," he continued. "It was late. I had just finished a meeting. I thought I was safe." He let out a quiet, humorless chuckle. "I was wrong." Amara listened closely, her eyes fixed on him. "They came out of nowhere," he said, "3 of them, armed, fast, efficient." His jaw tightened slightly. "They knew exactly who I was." Amara's brows furrowed. "Why would anyone kidnap you?" she asked. He paused just for a second, then he looked at her and gave a simple answer. "Because I have something they want." He didn't say more, and Amara didn't press. But something about the way he happened after that. She asked gently. "They kept me in a house," he said. "I don't know where. Couldn't see much. They were careful." His voice lowered slightly. "They talked when they thought I couldn't hear." Amara leaned forward slightly. "What did they say?" "That I wouldn't survive," he replied. The words hung heavy in the air. They weren't planning to negotiate, he continued. They weren't planning to release me. His eyes darkened. They were planning to end it. Amara felt a chill run through her. How did you escape? She asked quietly. A faint spark returned to his eyes. Opportunity, he said. One of them got careless. I ran. He shook his head slightly, as if still replaying the moment. They chased me. I didn't know where I was going. I just ran. His voice slowed, softened, and then I saw the river. Amara's breath caught slightly. I thought I could cross it, he said. I thought I could make it to the other side and lose them. He let out a quiet breath. I miscalculated. The fire flickered. The current was stronger than I expected, he continued. Once I was in, I couldn't fight it. He looked down at his hands. I remember thinking he paused, then looked up at her, that this was how it ended. Silence. Amara's chest tightened. But then he said softly, his eyes met hers, you appeared. The words were simple, but the weight behind them was not. For a moment, neither of them looked away. Then Amara broke the gaze first. I almost didn't come, she admitted quietly. He blinked slightly. What do you mean I heard you? She said, but I was scared. She swallowed. It was dark. The storm was loud. I thought maybe it was nothing. She looked at the fire. But then you called again, she continued. And I realized if I didn't go and it was real, her voice softened, I wouldn't be able to live with that. The hut fell silent again. He studied her differently now, not just with curiosity, but with something deeper, respect. You risked your life for someone you didn't know, he said. Amara shook her head slightly. No, she replied, I just did what I could. That's not something everyone does, he said quietly. She didn't respond because deep down she knew he was right. After a while he shifted the focus. What about you? He asked. Amara stiffened slightly. My story isn't important, she said quickly. It is to me, he replied. She looked at him, searching his face, trying to understand why. Why? She asked. Because you saved my life, he said simply. That makes you important. The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. She looked away toward the fire. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she spoke. My parents are dead, she said quietly. The words came out flat, but the emotion behind them was not. My mother died. First, she continued. She was sick. There was nothing we could do. Her fingers tightened slightly around the edge of her wrapper. My father tried, but he didn't last long after that. She paused. I think he died of sadness. She added softly. The man didn't interrupt, didn't speak, just listened. I was 10, she said. After that it was just me. The fire crackled. No one really wanted the responsibility, she continued. People helped at first, then they stopped. She gave a small, almost invisible shrug. I learned how to survive. She glanced up at him briefly. I'm still learning. Silence. But this silence was different. It wasn't empty. It was full of understanding, of shared pain, of something unspoken. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Amara shook her head. Don't be, she replied. It's my life. He studied her again. You don't sound bitter, he observed. She thought about that for a moment, then shook her head. Again. What's the point, she said. It won't change anything. The simplicity of her answer struck him deeply. In his world, people held on to anger, used it, weaponized it. But her, she had nothing, and yet she carried peace. It didn't make sense, and yet it did. You're different, he said quietly. Amara frowned slightly. I've heard that before, she said. I don't know if it's a good thing. It is, he replied without hesitation. She didn't argue, but she didn't fully accept it either. The fire burned lower. The night grew quieter, but neither of them moved. Neither of them wanted to break the moment. Because somehow in that small hut on a night that began with fear and uncertainty, they had found something unexpected connection, real, unfiltered, unplanned. And as the last of the storm faded into silence, two strangers sat across from each other, no longer just survivors of a single night, but the beginning of something neither of them yet understood. Something that would change both their lives forever. Morning did not arrive quietly. It never did in Amapu. The village woke the way it always had, gradually, naturally, predictably. Roosters crowed from different corners, their calls overlapping in uneven rhythm. Women stepped out of their huts with wrappers tied firmly around their waists, stretching their backs before beginning the day's chores. The smell of fire with smoke rose into the cool morning air as cooking fires were lit. But on this particular morning, something was different. Inside her small hut, Amara stirred slowly. The first thing she felt was stiffness. Her arms ached from the night before. Her back protested as she shifted, and her legs felt heavier than usual. For a brief moment, she forgot why. Then she turned her head and saw him, the stranger, still lying on the mat, still alive. The memory rushed back instantly. The storm, the river, the struggle, the long walk home, the firelight conversation. Amara pushed herself up, wincing slightly as her body reminded her of every effort she had made. She looked at him carefully. His breathing was steadier now. His face, though still bruised, looked less strained. Relief settled quietly in her chest. "You made it through the night," she murmured softly, as if her voice reached him. His eyelids fluttered. Slowly he woke. His gaze moved around the hut, clearer now than it had been the night before. He seemed more aware, more present. Then his eyes landed on her. "You're still here," he said, his voice low but stronger. Amara raised an eyebrow slightly. "This is my home," she replied. A faint smile touched his lips. "Right," he said, "that makes sense." She stood and stretched lightly, then moved toward the small pot in the corner. "I'll get you some water," she said as she poured it into a cup. He slowly pushed himself into a sitting position. This time he managed it with less struggle. "You shouldn't move too fast," she warned, glancing over her shoulder. "I've had worse mornings," he replied. She handed him the water. He took it, their fingers brushing briefly. Both of them noticed. Neither of them said anything. He drank slowly, then let out a quiet breath. "Thank you," he said. Amara nodded. For a moment, the simplicity of the morning almost made the previous night feel distant. Almost. Then it came. First it was faint, a low rumble. Amara frowned slightly. "What is that?" she muttered. The man's expression changed instantly. Sharp, alert, he turned his head toward the direction of the sound. The rumble grew louder, stronger, closer. Amara stepped toward the door, curiosity pulling her forward. When she stepped outside, she froze. Dust rose in the distance. Thick, heavy, and within it movement. Vehicles. Not one, not two, but many. Large black vehicles sped toward the village, their engines roaring in a way that did not belong in a place like Amapu. Amara's heart began to pound. Behind her, the man stood, his eyes narrowed slightly. "They found me," he said quietly. Amara turned to him. "What do you mean?" But before he could answer, the convoy arrived. The vehicles came to a sharp stop, one after another, forming a line that instantly drew the attention of the entire village. Doors opened. Men stepped out. Not ordinary men. They were dressed in dark suits, their movements precise, their expressions serious. Some of them scanned the surroundings, their eyes sharp and calculating. Others moved quickly, communicating in low, urgent tones. The villagers gathered almost immediately. Whispers spread like wildfire. "Who are they? What's happening? Is something wrong?" Amara stood still, her mind struggling to catch up with what she was seeing. This kind of scene did not happen here. One of the men stepped forward, his eyes searching rapidly. Then he saw him. "Sir." The word cut through the air. Clear, loud, respectful. Amara's breath caught. The man beside her stepped forward slightly. "I'm here," he said. The reaction was immediate. The men moved toward him, quickly relief visible on their faces. "Sir, we've been searching all night," one of them said urgently. "We tracked your last known location, but lost signal near the river." Amara's heart began to race. "Sir." She turned slowly to look at him. Really look at him. The way they stood around him. The way they spoke to him. The way they waited for his response. This wasn't just a man. This was someone important. Very important. "You're injured." Another man said, stepping closer. "I'm fine," he replied calmly. "I was helped." Their eyes followed his gaze and landed on Amara. For a brief moment, everything went still. The contrast was undeniable. Them clean, sharp, powerful. Her barefoot dressed in worn clothes standing in front of a small, fragile hut. "Who is she?" one of the men asked quietly. The man didn't hesitate. "She saved my life." The words landed heavily. The men looked at her differently now. Not with curiosity, but with something closer to respect. Amara, however, barely heard them. Her mind was still trying to catch up. "Who are you?" she asked slowly. The man turned to her, and for the first time there was no reason to hide. "My name is Obinna Okeke," said. The name meant nothing to her but the reaction of the villagers. Everything. Gasps, whispers, shock. "Obinna Okeke." The Obinna Okeke. The billionaire Amara felt the ground shift beneath her. Billionaire. Her eyes widened slightly. She looked at him again. At the man she had dragged from the river. The man she had fed with the last of her food. The man who had sat across from her, sharing stories by firelight. And suddenly everything looked different. "You," she started, but couldn't finish. He stepped closer to her. "I didn't tell you everything," he said gently. She let out a soft, almost disbelieving laugh. "Everything," she repeated. "You didn't tell me anything." There was no anger in her voice, just shock. "I wanted to," he said, "but it didn't matter last night." She stared at him. Didn't matter to her. It changed everything. "I'm sorry," he added quietly. Amara shook her head slowly. "No," she said, "don't be." But her voice had changed. There was distance now. Uncertainty. Because suddenly, the simple connection they had, built the night before, felt complicated. Realizing this, Obinna took a step closer. "You saved me," he said again, not knowing who I was. Amara looked at him. "That's the point," she said softly. Silence. The weight of her words settled between them. Around them the village buzzed with excitement and disbelief. But in that moment felt like it was just the two of them again. Two people from completely different worlds standing at the edge of something neither of them fully understood. Then Obinna spoke. "Come with me." Amara blinked. "What?" "Come to the city," he said. "Let me help you." She stared at him. Help her. Her first instinct was to refuse, to retreat, to stay where things made sense. "I don't belong there," she said. He shook his head. "You belong wherever your life can grow," he replied. The words hit deeper than she expected. For a moment she said nothing. Her eyes drifted around the village, the huts, the people, the life she had always known. Then, back to him, to the opportunity standing in front of her. Unfamiliar, uncertain, but real. Her heart pounded. This was it. The moment where everything could change. The river had already shifted her life. Now the choice was hers. She took a slow breath and stepped forward. "I'll come," she said. And just like that, the girl no one chose was finally choosing her own future. The journey began with movement. Fast movement. The kind Amara had never experienced before. She sat stiffly in the back seat of one of the black vehicles, her hands resting tightly on her lap, her fingers gripping the edge of her wrapper, like it was the only familiar thing left in her world. The door had been closed gently behind her. Too gently. Even that felt strange. The seat beneath her was soft. Too soft. It swallowed her slightly, making her feel like she didn't know how to sit properly. The air inside the vehicle was cool. Unnaturally cool. And carried a faint scent she couldn't place. Clean. Refined. Different. Amara's eyes moved slowly around the interior. Everything looked expensive. The seats. The handles. The small glowing screen in front of her. Even the silence felt expensive. She swallowed. This is not my world. Across from her, Obinna watched quietly. He didn't interrupt her thoughts. Didn't rush her. He simply observed. You can ask questions, he said gently after a while. Amara blinked, slightly startled. I'm thinking, she replied. A faint smile touched his lips. I can tell. She hesitated, then finally asked, how fast are we going? Obinna glanced forward briefly. Fast enough to leave the village behind, he said. Amara looked out the window. The familiar landscape of Amapu was already fading. The dusty paths, the scattered huts, the open fields, all slipping away. For a brief moment her chest tightened. She wasn't just leaving a place. She was leaving a life. She pressed her lips together. Are you okay? Obinna asked. She nodded quickly. Yes. Then after a pause, I think so. He didn't push further. Outside, the scenery began to change. Slowly at first, then completely. The narrow paths became wider roads. The scattered huts became structured buildings. The quiet space of the village gave way to movement. People, vehicles, noise. Amara leaned slightly closer to the window. Her eyes widened. There were so many people, so many cars, so much happening. How do people live like this? She whispered. Obinna followed her gaze. You get used to it, he said. She shook her head slowly. I don't think I will. But even as she said it, something inside her stirred. Not fear. Not rejection. Something else. Curiosity. The car continued moving deeper further until the buildings grew taller, stronger, more intimidating. Amara's reflection stared back at her faintly in the glass. Simple, small, out of place. She looked down at her clothes, her worn blouse, her faded wrapper, her bare feet. Then she looked at Obinna. Clean, composed, effortless. The distance between them felt larger now than it had in the hut. She shifted slightly. I shouldn't be here, she said quietly. Obinna turned to her. Why would you say that? She gestured lightly at everything around them. All of this. She said, it's not for people like me. He held her gaze steady, unshaken. People like you, he repeated. She hesitated. People who come from nothing, she said. He leaned back slightly, studying her. You saved my life, he said. That doesn't sound like nothing to me. She didn't respond, because part of her wanted to believe him and part of her didn't know how. The car slowed, then stopped. Amara blinked. We're here, Obinna said. She looked outside and her breath caught. The building in front of her was massive, tall glass covered, shining under the daylight like something out of another world. People moved in and out of it with purpose, confidence. Belonging. Amara felt very small. This is where you work, she asked. Obinna nodded. She let out a soft breath. This is where they kidnapped you from, she added. Yes. Her eyes hardened slightly. For a brief moment she saw not the building but the danger behind it. Then it's not safe, she said. Obinna's expression shifted just slightly. It will be, he replied. The door opened. A man stood outside waiting respectfully. Sir, he said. Obina stepped out first, then turned and extended his hand toward Amara. She hesitated not because she didn't want to take it, but because she wasn't sure she was allowed to. He noticed. "It's okay," he said softly. She placed her hand in his. His grip was firm, reassuring, and just like that, she stepped out of the car. The air outside felt different, dizzy or sharper. People looked. Of course they looked. A barefoot village girl stepping out of a luxury vehicle beside a man like Obina, it wasn't something you ignored. Amara felt their eyes, every single one of them. Her instinct was to shrink, to disappear, but she didn't. She straightened slightly and walked. Inside the building, everything was even more overwhelming. Bright lights, smooth floors, walls that reflected her image back at her. She saw herself clearly now, and for a second stung. "Come," Obina said gently. She followed. People greeted him as they passed. "Good morning, sir." "Welcome back, sir." "We're glad you're safe, sir." Each "sir" hit her differently. This was not just a man, this was power. They entered a private elevator. The doors closed. Silence. Amara exhaled slowly. "Do they all know?" she asked. "Yes." She nodded. "I didn't know who you were," she said. "I know," he replied. "And you still stayed," she added. He looked at her. "You would have left if you knew," he asked. She thought about it, then shook her head. "No," she said. "You still would have been drowning." That answer made him smile. The elevator opened. The space they stepped into was quieter, more controlled, more exclusive. "This is my office floor," Obina said. Amara stepped forward slowly. Everything here felt intentional. Nothing out of place, nothing broken, nothing struggling to survive. It was the opposite of everything she had ever known. "Sit," Obina said, gesturing to a chair. She hesitated, then sat carefully. It was softer than anything she had ever touched. He watched her for a moment, then spoke. "You're going to stay here for now," he said. "We'll get you proper clothes, food, anything you need." She looked up at him quickly. "I don't need much," she said. "I know," he replied. "But you deserve more." The words landed softly but deeply. No one had ever said that to her before. She looked away quickly. "I can work," she said. "I don't want to just take." Obina nodded. "You will," he said. "If that's what you want." "It is," she replied firmly. He studied her for a moment, then smiled. "Good," he said. "I like that." There was something in his tone now, something lighter, warmer, something that hadn't been there before. Amara felt it, and for a brief moment she smiled too. Small, uncertain, but real. Outside the office, the city moved as it always did. Fast, unforgiving, full of opportunity. Inside, a village girl sat in a world she never imagined, not as a visitor, but as someone whose life had just begun to change. And though she didn't fully understand it yet, she was no longer just surviving. She was stepping into something more, something bigger, something that little by little was beginning to include him. The first few days felt unreal. Amara woke each morning unsure if she was still dreaming. The bed she slept on was too soft, too wide, nothing like the thin mat she had known all her life. The room itself felt too clean, too quiet, like it didn't belong to someone like her. Sometimes she would wake up in the middle of the night, sit upright and just look around, waiting for the illusion to disappear, but it never did. On the third morning, she stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. She wasn't used to mirrors, not like this one. Tall, clear, honest. Her reflection stared back at her, but it wasn't the same girl from Amapu. Her hair had been washed, carefully combed and styled neatly. Her skin, once constantly coated with dust and sun, now looked softer, clearer. The clothes she wore, a simple but elegant blouse and skirt, fit her properly, not too tight, not too loose, just right. She lifted her hand slightly, almost as if she needed to confirm it was really her. "Is this me?" she whispered. There was a knock on the door. "Come in," she said quickly, stepping back. A woman entered, one of the staff assigned to help her settle in. "You look beautiful," the woman said with a warm smile. Amara shifted, slightly uncomfortable with the compliment. "I just look different," she replied. The woman shook her head gently. "No," she said. "You've always been this. You just couldn't see it before." Amara didn't know how to respond to that, so she didn't. "Mr. Obina is waiting for you downstairs," the woman added. Amara nodded. Her heart began to beat a little faster. It still felt strange hearing his name spoken like that, with respect, with weight. She took one last look at her reflection, then turned and walked out. The building was just as alive as before. People moving quickly, voices low but purposeful. Everything flowing with a rhythm she was still trying to understand. When she reached the office, she saw him. Obina stood near the large window speaking to someone on the phone. His posture was relaxed but commanding, his voice calm but firm. He ended the call just as she stepped in. For a moment he paused, really looked at her, and something in his expression shifted. "You look," he started, then stopped. Amara felt her chest tighten slightly. "Different," she offered. He shook his head. "Confident," he said instead. The words surprised her. "I don't feel confident," she admitted. He smiled slightly. "That's fine," he said. "You don't have to feel it yet." She frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "It comes with time," he replied. "Right now, you just have to show up." She nodded slowly. "Show up." That she could do. "Today," he continued, "you'll start learning how things work here." Amara straightened slightly. "I'm ready," she said. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Good," he said. And just like that, her new life began. The first day was overwhelming. Amara sat in a small office space, watching, listening, trying to absorb everything. Computers, phones, documents, words she had never heard before, processes she didn't understand. Her head spun. At one point she stared at the screen in front of her for so long that the letters began to blur together. "This is too much," she whispered under her breath. "Only if you try to learn everything at once." She turned. Obina stood at the doorway. "I didn't hear you come in," she said. "I know," he replied. He walked in slowly and stood beside her. "Take it step by step," he said. "No one expects you to know everything immediately." "I expect it," she said quietly. He glanced at her. "Why?" She hesitated, then said, "Because I don't want to fail." The honesty in her voice made him pause. "You won't," he said. "You don't know that," she replied. He looked at her, steady, certain. "I do," he said. Something about the way he said it made her believe him just a little. Days turned into a week, then another. Amara learned slowly at first, then faster. She asked questions, listened carefully, stayed late, came early. When others left, she stayed behind, practicing what she had learned, repeating tasks until she got them right. Some people noticed, others didn't, but not everyone was kind. "She's just a village girl," one employee whispered to another. "She doesn't belong here," the other replied. Amara heard them. Of course she did, but she didn't respond. Instead, she worked harder. Every mistake became a lesson, every challenge became fuel, and slowly things began to change. She started understanding conversations, recognizing patterns, solving small problems on her own. One afternoon, a minor issue came up in the office, something that had confused even a few of the staff. Amara watched quietly, then stepped forward. "What if we try?" This she suggested. The room went quiet. All eyes turned to her. One of the senior staff frowned. "And how would you know that?" he asked. Amara held his gaze. "I've seen something similar before," she said. It wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either. It was instinct, observation, understanding. They hesitated, then tried it. It worked. Silence filled the room, then murmurs. "Interesting. She's right." Amara stepped back quietly. She didn't smile, didn't celebrate, but inside something shifted. She could do this. Across the room, Obinna watched, and for the first time, he wasn't just impressed. He was intrigued. Later that evening, he found her still working. "You're still here," he said. She didn't look up. "I'm almost done," she replied. He leaned against the doorframe. "You've been saying that for 2 hours." She paused, then looked at him. "I need to understand this," she said. He stepped closer. "You already understand more than you think," he said. She shook her head. "Not enough," she replied. He studied her for a moment. "You don't give up easily," he said. She met his gaze. "I can't afford to," she replied. There it was again, that strength, that quiet, unshakable determination. He felt it, and this time it affected him not just as admiration, but as something deeper, something he wasn't ready to name yet. "Come," he said finally. "You need a break." She hesitated. "I'm fine," she said. "That wasn't a suggestion," he replied. She blinked, then smiled, a real smile. "Okay," she said. And for a moment the distance between them felt smaller again. As they walked out together side by side, neither of them said it, but both of them felt it. Something was changing, not suddenly, not loudly, but steadily, like the river. And just like before, it was carrying them somewhere neither of them had planned. The city never truly slept. Even at night it breathed. Lights flickered from distant buildings. Cars moved like restless veins along glowing roads. And somewhere far below, life continued in quiet persistence. But high above it all there was stillness. Amara stood on the balcony, her fingers resting lightly against the smooth railing. The night air brushed gently against her skin, cooler than the day, carrying a softness that felt almost unfamiliar. She had begun to like this place. Not because it was loud, not because it was beautiful, but because it made her feel something new. She looked out at the endless stretch of lights, each one representing a life, a story, a struggle, and for the first time in her life she felt like she was part of something bigger than survival. "You come here often?" His voice came from behind her, calm, familiar. Amara didn't turn immediately. "I like it," she said, softly. "It's quiet even when it's not." Obinna stepped out onto the balcony, closing the door gently behind him. "I know what you mean," he said. He moved to stand beside her, not too close, not too far. For a moment neither of them spoke. The silence between them had changed. It was no longer cautious, no longer uncertain. It was comfortable, alive. "How was your day?" he asked. Amara let out a small breath. "Long," she said, then after a pause. "But good." He nodded. "You handled yourself well today," he said. She glanced at him. "You were watching?" she asked. "Always," he replied. The answer lingered. Amara looked back at the city. "You don't have to do that," she said. "Do what? Watch me," she said. "I'll be fine." Obinna studied her profile, the way the city lights reflected softly in her eyes, the way she stood strong but still learning her place in this world. "I know you will," he said quietly. She turned slightly. "Then, why do you?" she asked. He hesitated because the answer was not simple, because somewhere along the way his concern had become something else. "I don't know," he admitted. Amara held his gaze for a moment, then looked away again. But her heart had already heard what his words didn't fully say. The wind shifted slightly, brushing past them both. "I used to come to the river every evening," she said suddenly. Obinna listened. It was the Only place I felt calm. She continued like the world wasn't pressing down on me. She smiled faintly. I used to talk to it sometimes. He raised an eyebrow slightly. What did you say? He asked. Amara let out a soft laugh. Anything, she said. Everything. Then more quietly, I used to wonder if my life would ever change. She paused. I didn't think it actually would. Obina leaned slightly against the railing. And now, he asked. She turned to him. Now I don't know what my life is anymore, she admitted. There was no fear in her voice, just honesty. I wake up every day and everything is different, she continued. The place, the people, the way I'm treated. Her eyes softened. The way I see myself. That last part was quiet, but it mattered the most. Obina felt it. You've always been that person, he said. You're just seeing it now. Amara shook her head slightly. No, she said. I've changed. He didn't argue because she had, but not in the way she thought. You've grown, he said instead. She considered that, then nodded slowly. Maybe, she said. Silence settled again, but this time carried something deeper, something closer. Obina turned slightly toward her. Amara, he said. The way he said her name, soft, intentional, it made her heart skip. She looked at him. Yes. For a moment he said nothing because he was realizing something. Something he had been avoiding, something that had been building quietly, steadily, without permission. You changed my life, he said. Amara blinked slightly. No, she said quickly. You're the one who. He shook his head. Listen, he said gently. She fell silent. That night, he continued, I thought everything was over. His voice was calm, but there was something beneath it. Something real. I've built my life on control, he said, planning strategy, knowing what comes next. He let out a quiet breath. And then I lost all of it. Amara watched him closely. I was in that river, he said. And for the first time in a long time, I had nothing. His eyes met hers. No control, no power, no certainty. Pause. And then you showed up. The words settled deeply. You didn't know who I was, he continued. You didn't know what I had. You didn't expect anything. His voice softened. You just chose to save me. Amara felt her chest tighten. I didn't think about it, she said quietly. I know, he replied. That was the point. He took a small step closer. And ever since that moment, he said, things haven't been the same. The air between them shifted. Amara's heart began to race. She didn't move, didn't step back, didn't step forward. She just stood there, feeling it, all of it. I've met a lot of people. Obina continued, worked with them, trusted some, lost others. He held her gaze. But I've never met anyone like you. Her breath caught. Why? She asked softly. Because you're real, he said. Simple, direct, true. Amara's eyes searched his face. And you're not, she asked. A faint smile touched his lips. Not like you, he admitted. Silence. But now it wasn't quiet. It was loud, with everything they weren't saying, with everything they were beginning to understand. Amara's voice came out softer now. You don't know me that well, she said. I know enough, he replied. She shook her head slightly. No, she said. You know the girl who saved you. He took another small step closer. I know the girl who works harder than anyone in that building, he said. Another step. The girl who doesn't let fear stop her. Closer now. The girl who still chooses kindness even when life hasn't been kind to her. They were standing just inches apart. Amara's heartbeat echoed in her ears. You see too much, she whispered. Not enough, he said. And then he said it. I think I'm falling in love with you. The world didn't stop. The city didn't go silent. The lights didn't dim. But for Amara, everything shifted. Her breath caught. Her thoughts scattered. Her heart understood. She looked at him, really looked at him. And in that moment there was no billionaire, no village girl, no difference, just two people connected by something real. I don't understand this, she admitted softly. You don't have to, he said. She swallowed. It doesn't make sense, she added. He nodded. I know. Pause. But it's real, he said. That was enough. Amara let out a slow breath. Then she smiled. Small, nervous, but certain. So am I, she said. The words barely left her lips, but they changed everything. Something in Obina's expression softened completely. Not control, not power, just feeling, and, for the first time, neither of them held back. They didn't rush, didn't move too quickly. They just stood there together, at the edge of something new, something fragile, something powerful, something that had found its way without permission, without plan, without reason, love. And as the city lights stretched endlessly before them, two completely different lives became one story, quietly, naturally, inevitably happiness. Amara was beginning to learn had a quiet way of making you forget that danger still existed. Not because it disappeared, but because for a moment it stepped back and waited. The days after that night on the balcony felt lighter, easier. Amara moved through the building with a new kind of confidence. Not loud or obvious, but steady. People still looked at her, still whispered sometimes, but it didn't carry the same weight anymore. She had found her place. Not fully, but enough. And Obina, had changed too. There was something softer about him now. Something less guarded. Their conversations became more frequent, more personal. Less about work and more about everything else. Sometimes, it was just small things. A shared look across the room. A quiet smile. After a long meeting, a simple, "Have you eaten?" that carried more meaning than the words themselves. Other times it was silence, comfortable, silence the kind that didn't need to be filled. But not everyone was blind to it. From behind glass walls and polished smiles, eyes watched, observed, calculated. And one pair of eyes in particular was not pleased. Mr. Adewale, co-founder, partner, trusted ally, or at least that's what he appeared to be. He stood in his office looking down at the city through the large window. His hands rested behind his back, his posture straight, his expression unreadable. She's getting too close, he said. Behind him a man leaned casually against the wall. Unlike Adewale, his presence carried a rough edge, sharp, careless, dangerous. You want me to handle it? The man asked. Adewale didn't turn immediately. No, he said after a moment. Not yet. He finally turned, his eyes cold. She's not the problem, he continued. The man raised an eyebrow. Then who is? A faint smile touched Adewale's lips. He is, he said. The man smirked slightly. So the plan hasn't changed. Adewale's gaze hardened. It's already in motion. Silence. Next time, he added quietly, we don't fail. The air in the room shifted, heavy, final. And just like that, the danger that had once nearly taken Obina's life was rising again, unseen, unstoppable. Later that evening, the building had begun to empty. The usual rush had faded. The noise softened. The lights dimmed in certain areas. Amara sat at her desk finishing up a few tasks. She rubbed her temple lightly. You're still here. She looked up. Obina stood by the door. I told you, she said, I like to finish what I start. He smiled. I've noticed, he said. She stretched slightly, then stood. I'm done now, she added. Good, he replied. Let's go. She nodded. As they walked through the quieter halls, something felt different. Not obvious, not clear, but there. Amara slowed, slightly. What is it? Obina asked. She hesitated. I don't know, she said. It just feels. She trailed off. Feels what? He pressed gently. She shook her head. Maybe I'm just tired, she said. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Let's get you home," he said. They walked on, but the feeling didn't leave her. Later that night, Amara returned to the building. Not because she had to, but because she forgot something. A small file she had been working on. "It'll only take a minute," she muttered to herself as she stepped out of the elevator. The floor was almost empty. Most of the lights were off. Only a few remained on, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Her footsteps echoed softly as she walked toward her desk. The silence was different now, heavier. She reached her desk, picked up the file, and turned to leave. Then she heard it. Voices low, close, from one of the offices down the hall. Amara froze. First she thought she was imagining it, but then she heard it again. "This time we finish it." Her breath caught. The voice, she recognized it. "Mr. Attawale." Her heart began to pound. She stepped closer, slowly, carefully. The office door was slightly open, just enough. "No mistakes," Attawale continued. Another voice replied, "You should have let me handle it the first time." Amara's chest tightened. First time, her mind raced. "The kidnapping. He won't survive the next one," the second voice said. The words hit her like a physical force. Her hand moved to her mouth, stifling a gasp. "No, no, this couldn't be. He's already suspicious," Attawale said. "We have to move carefully." "Suspicious?" And the girl, the other man asked. Amara's blood ran cold. A pause. Then, "She's nothing," Attawale said dismissively. The words stung. "But if she becomes a problem," he added. Another pause. Then, "Get rid of her." The world tilted. Amara stepped back slightly, her heart racing uncontrollably. They were talking about her, about Obina, about everything. This wasn't just a conversation. This was a plan, a dangerous one. Her mind screamed at her to leave, to run, to tell Obina, but her body wouldn't move. "We'll make it look like an accident," the second man said. Amara's breath came in short, uneven bursts. She had to go. Now. She turned slowly, carefully, but her foot brushed against something. A faint sound. Too loud. The voices stopped. Silence, heavy, immediate. Amara's heart stopped. "Did you hear that?" the second man asked. Attawale's voice came next. "Yes." Footsteps coming closer. Amara's eyes widened. "No, no, no." She moved quickly, trying to slip away silently, but it was too late. The door opened and their eyes met. For a moment, no one spoke. No one moved. Time froze. Attawale's expression shifted, slowly, from surprise to understanding, to something much darker. "Well," he said calmly. Amara's breath caught. "This is unfortunate." She turned to run, but a hand grabbed her hard. She screamed, but it was cut off instantly. Darkness, silence, and just like that, the safety she had begun to believe in shattered. Somewhere else in the city, Obina stood by his window, unaware. The night stretched on, quiet, deceptive, but beneath it everything was about to change. The night felt wrong. Obina didn't know why at first. There was no clear reason, no obvious sign, but something inside him wouldn't settle. He stood by the large window in his apartment, staring out at the city below. The lights were still there, the movement, the noise. Everything looked normal, but he didn't feel normal. He checked his phone again. Still nothing. Amara had said she would be back quickly, just a few minutes. She had forgotten a file. That was over an hour ago. Obina's jaw tightened slightly. She should be back by now, he muttered. He tried to push the thought away, tried to be logical. Maybe she got caught up in something. Maybe she stayed back to finish more work. Maybe no, Amara wasn't careless. She wouldn't disappear without saying something. He picked up his phone and dialed her number. It rang once, twice, then voicemail. His grip on the phone tightened. Pick up, he muttered. He called again. Same result. A cold feeling settled in his chest. No, not again. His mind flashed back to the river, the fear, the helplessness. He shook his head sharply. No, he said out loud, not this time. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. Minutes later, he was back at the office building. The place that had once been routine now felt like a threat. The guards at the entrance straightened immediately when they saw him. "Sir, where is she?" he cut in. They exchanged confused glances. "Who, Sir?" "Amara," he said sharply. "She came back here." One of them checked quickly. "Yes, sir," he said. "She came in earlier." Obina's chest tightened, and the man hesitated. "We assume she left, sir." Obina's expression hardened. "You assumed?" The tension in his voice was enough to make both men straighten further. "Check the cameras," he ordered. "Now." They moved quickly. Inside, Obina walked fast, his footsteps echoing through the now quiet building. Everything felt too still, too quiet, wrong. He reached her desk. The chair was slightly pushed back. The file she had come for was gone, but something else caught his attention. A faint mark on the floor, like something had been dragged. His pulse spiked. "No," he whispered. He turned sharply. "Security," he called. Footsteps approached quickly. "We're pulling up the footage, sir," one of them said. "Bring it," Obina replied. They led him to the control room. The screen flickered. Footage rolled. There she was, Amara, walking down the hall, calm, unaware. Obina's eyes stayed locked on the screen. Then she stopped, turned slightly, like she heard something. His chest tightened. She moved toward one of the offices, then disappeared from view. Seconds passed. Then the door opened. Two men, a struggle. Obina's hands clenched into fists. "Pause," he said sharply. The screen froze. He leaned closer. The men's faces were partially visible, but one of them he knew. A chill ran down his spine. "No," he said slowly, but the truth was already there. Clear, undeniable. "Play it," he said. The footage continued. Amara struggled. Then she went, still, carried away, gone. Silence filled the room, heavy, dangerous. Obina stepped back slowly. For a moment he didn't speak, didn't move. Then he turned. "Call the police," he said. His voice was calm, too calm. "And lock this building down." The security team moved instantly. Within minutes, the building was no longer just an office. It was a crime scene. Amara woke to darkness. Her head throbbed. Her body felt heavy. Her thoughts slow. She blinked. Nothing. Only shadows. She tried to move. Her wrists were tied. Her breath caught. No memory rushed back. The voices, the door, the hand. Her heart began to race. "Hello," she called out. Her voice echoed faintly. No answer. She swallowed. "Stay calm. Panic won't help." She took a slow breath. Then another. "Think." The room smelled damp, closed. She shifted slightly. Pain shot through her wrists, but she ignored it. She had to understand where she was, what they wanted, and how to get out. A door creaked open. Light spilled in. Amara squinted. A figure stepped in, then another. Her heart dropped. Adiwale. He looked exactly the same, calm, composed, but now there was no mask, only truth. "You're awake," he said. Amara said nothing. Her eyes stayed locked on him. "You shouldn't have been there," he continued. Her voice came out steady. "You kidnapped him," she said. He smiled faintly. "Smart," he replied. Her jaw tightened. "Why?" she asked. Adewale stepped closer. "Because everything he has should have been mine," he said. His voice was no longer calm. It was sharp, controlled anger. "I built that company with him," he continued. "I made sacrifices. I took risks. He leaned slightly closer. And yet he gets everything. Amara held his gaze. So you tried to kill him, she said. Pause. Then yes. The word landed heavily. No hesitation, no regret. And now he added, you've made things complicated. Amara's heart pounded. I'm not afraid of you, she said. It wasn't entirely true, but she said it anyway. Ottawale studied her, then smiled again. You should be, he said. He turned slightly. Keep her here, he said to the other man. We'll decide what to do later. Then he walked out. The door closed. Darkness returned. Amara exhaled slowly. Her heart was still racing, but her mind was clear. Obinna would come. She didn't know how, didn't know when, but she knew. One thing, he wouldn't stop. Back at the building, the police had arrived. Questions, voices, movement. But Obinna stood apart, focused, controlled. A detective approached him. We'll find her, he said. Obinna nodded once. You will, he replied. But inside, he was already planning, already thinking, already moving ahead. Because this time, he wasn't the man in the river. He wasn't powerless. He wasn't waiting to be saved. This time, he was the one coming, and he would tear the world apart, if he had to bring her back alive, no matter what. Time moved differently when fear was involved. For Amara, it stretched, each second heavier than the last, each moment pressing against her chest like an invisible weight. The room remained dark, silent, except for the faint sounds that reminded her she wasn't alone. Footsteps, distant voices, doors opening and closing somewhere beyond her reach. Her wrists still ached from the restraints, but she had stopped struggling. Not because she had given up, but because she understood something important. Panic would not save her. Clarity might. She leaned her head back against the cold wall and closed her eyes briefly. Think. Ottawale had made one mistake. He had talked, and in talking he had revealed enough. That meant one thing. He believed he had already won. Amara opened her eyes. Slowly. That was his weakness. Across the city, Obinna stood in the center of controlled chaos. Phones rang. Officers moved in and out. Voices overlapped with urgency, but he remained still focused. Sir, the detective approached again, holding a tablet. We've tracked the vehicle from the CCTV footage. It left the main road about 30 minutes after the abduction. Obinna turned. Where did it go? The detective tapped the screen. It disappears here, he said. Rural outskirts, limited surveillance. Obinna's jaw tightened. Meaning, he asked. Meaning they knew what they were doing, the detective replied. Of course they did. Ottawale wasn't careless. He was calculated, which meant he had a plan. And if he had a plan, Amara was running out of time. Obinna's voice dropped slightly. What else? The detective hesitated. Sir, there's something else, he said. Obinna's eyes sharpened. Wah. We identified one of the men in the footage, the detective said. He's connected to a series of high-level operations, not small-time. Obinna didn't react outwardly, but inside everything aligned. Ottawale, it had to be. There's more, the detective added carefully. Obinna's gaze hardened. Say it. The detective took a breath. We believe this wasn't random, he said. This was planned. And it may be connected to your previous kidnapping. Silence heavy. Obinna didn't need confirmation. He already knew. Ottawale, he said. The detective blinked slightly. You have a suspect? He asked. Obinna looked at him. I have more than that, he replied. Back in the dark room, Amara heard the door open again. Light spilled in once more. Footsteps. Ottawale returned. This time alone. He closed the door behind him slowly. You're quiet, he observed. Amara met his gaze. I'm thinking, she said. A faint smile touched his lips. About escaping? He asked. About you, she replied. That caught his attention. Oh, he said. Amara leaned slightly forward. You talk too much, she said calmly. The smile faded. What does that mean? He asked. It means you think you've already won, she replied. A pause. Then he laughed. Soft, controlled. And I haven't, he asked. Amara held his gaze. No, she said. Silence. Something in her tone shifted the air. You made a mistake, she continued. His expression darkened slightly. And what mistake is that? He asked. You told me everything, she said. The words landed hard. A flicker of something passed through his eyes, but it disappeared just as quickly. No one is coming for you, he said. Amara didn't flinch. Yes, he is, she replied. The certainty in her voice was unshaken. Adewale studied her for a long moment, then shook his head slightly. You don't understand how this works, he said. No, she said quietly. You don't. Silence. Then a sound. Distant at first, but growing louder. Vehicles. Multiple. Fast. Adewale's head turned slightly. His expression changed. Not fear, but awareness. They found us, Amara said softly. He looked at her sharply. How, he demanded. She didn't answer because she didn't need to. Outside, headlights cut through the darkness. Police vehicles surrounded the building. Officers moved quickly, taking positions, weapons ready, focused, prepared. Obinna stepped out of one of the vehicles. His eyes locked onto the structure ahead. This was it. Stay behind us, the detective said. Obinna didn't respond because there was no version of this where he stayed behind. Inside, tension exploded. Move her, Adewale snapped. But it was too late. The sound of forced entry echoed through the building. Doors breaking, shouts, commands. Police chaos erupted. The man guarding Amara rushed forward, but before he could act, the door burst open. Officers flooded in. Don't move. The man froze. Hands raised. Adewale stood still. For a moment, everything paused. Then it ended. Minutes later, Amara was untied. Her hands trembled slightly as the restraints fell away. You're safe now, one of the officers said. But her eyes were already searching, looking, waiting. Then she saw him. Obinna. Standing in the doorway. Alive. Safe. There. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she ran. And he met her halfway. Their arms wrapped around each other instantly. Tight. Real. Alive. You're okay, he said, his voice low, almost breaking. I knew you would come, she replied. And she meant it. He pulled back slightly, his hands still on her shoulders, his eyes scanning her face like he needed to confirm she was truly there. I'm sorry, he said. She shook her head. No, she said. You found me. Behind them, officers moved Adewale forward, handcuffed, silent, but not defeated, not yet. Wait, Amara said suddenly. Everyone paused. She stepped forward toward him. Adewale looked at her, still composed. You lose, she said. He smirked slightly. Do I? He replied. Amara didn't hesitate. Yes, she said. Then turned to the officers. He planned everything, she said clearly. The kidnapping, the attack, all of it. The room fell silent. Her voice carried. Strong. Unshaken. I heard him, she continued. He confessed. The detective stepped forward. That's enough, he said. Adewale's smirk faded. For the first time, there was no control, only consequence. Weeks later, the courtroom was silent. Adewale stood before the judge. No longer powerful, no longer untouchable, just a man facing the truth. The verdict came, guilty, on all counts. The sentence, prison, long, final, justice. Outside the world, continued. But, for Amara and Obina, something had shifted. Not just survival, not just love, but something stronger, something proven, through fear, through danger, through truth. As they stood together side by side, they both understood something now. What they had was real, unbreakable. And no matter what came next, they would face it together. The village of Amapu had never seen a day like this before, not in all its quiet years, not in all its seasons of dust and rain. From early morning, the air felt different, alive, buzzing. Women gathered in small groups, their voices filled with excitement as they adjusted wrappers and braided hair. Children ran barefoot across the dusty paths, laughing louder than usual, their curiosity impossible to contain. Even the elders, who rarely showed surprise, sat outside their huts watching the road with keen interest because something extraordinary was about to happen. At the far end of the village, near the path that led to the river, a convoy approached. The same kind of vehicles that had once arrived, like a mystery, like a shock, like a disruption. But this time they brought something else: celebration. The cars rolled in slowly, carefully, as if respecting the land they now entered. Dust rose behind them, but no one complained. No one moved away. Everyone watched. And when the doors opened, silence fell. Amara stepped out. For a moment no one spoke, because the girl they remembered was not the same girl standing before them. She wore a gown, simple, elegant, flowing softly with the breeze. Her hair was styled beautifully, her posture confident, her presence undeniable. But it wasn't the clothes, it wasn't the transformation, it was her. The same eyes, the same quiet strength, the same heart. She came back, someone whispered, but not as the girl they pitied, as something more. Behind her, Obina stepped out, dressed in a well-tailored suit, composed yet warm. His presence carried the same quiet authority, but now there was something else in him too. Softness. Not the kind that weakens, but the kind that comes from loving deeply. The villagers watched as he walked around the car and stood beside Amara, not ahead of her, not above her, beside her. And that alone said everything. Amara looked around slowly, at the huts, the paths, the people, the life she had once known. Nothing had changed. And yet everything had. Her eyes landed on the small hut at the edge of the village. Her hut, still standing, still fragile, still holding memories of everything she had survived. Her chest tightened slightly. "I didn't think I would come back like this," she said softly. Obina followed her gaze. "Like what?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Not alone," she said. He looked at her. "You were never meant to be alone," he replied. The words settled gently, and for once she believed them completely. The ceremony was simple, not because it had to be, but because it was meant to be. Under a wide canopy decorated with fabric and flowers, the villagers gathered, forming a circle of witnesses to something none of them had expected. A union, not just of two people, but of two worlds. Amara stood at the center, her hands steady, her heart full. As she looked around, she saw faces she had known all her life. Some kind, some indifferent, some who had once looked at her with pity. Now they looked at her with something else: respect, pride, wonder. The ceremony began. Words were spoken, blessings given. But for Amara, everything felt like a quiet blur because her focus was on one thing: him. Obina standing across from her, the man she had pulled from a river, the man who had entered her life like a storm and stayed like peace. When it was time for the vows, silence fell, not forced, natural, because everyone felt it, the weight of the moment. Obina spoke first. I had everything, he said. His voice was calm, clear. Or at least I thought I did. He paused. Power, success, control. A faint smile touched his lips, but none of it meant anything until I met you. Amara's breath caught, slightly. You saved my life, he continued, but more than that. He looked at her. You showed me what it means to live it. Silence, deep, real. I promise, he said, to stand beside you, to protect you, to grow with you. Pause. And to never forget the night the river gave me something I didn't know I was missing. Amara's eyes shimmered. Then it was her turn. She took a small breath. I had nothing, she said. Her voice was soft but steady. No family, no home that felt whole, no future I could see. She looked at him. And then I found you. A small smile appeared. Or maybe you found me. A few soft laughs rippled through the crowd. But I didn't fall in love with what you have, she continued. Her voice grew stronger. I fell in love with who you are. She stepped slightly closer, the man who listens, who sees, who chooses to care. Her eyes held his. I promise to stand with you through everything, not because life is easy, pause, but because we are stronger together. Silence. Then applause, soft at first, then growing, because everyone felt it. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a story, a miracle, a full circle. Later, as the sun began to set, Amara slipped away quietly without announcement. Her feet carried her down a familiar path, the same one she had walked countless times until she reached it, the river. It flowed as it always had, unchanged, steady, endless. Amara stepped closer. Her reflection shimmered faintly on the surface. For a moment she said nothing. Then, thank you, she whispered. The words were simple, but they carried everything. Behind her, footsteps approached. She didn't turn. She already knew. Obinna stepped beside her. You always come back here, he said softly. She nodded. It's where everything started, she replied. He looked at the water. And almost ended, he added. She smiled slightly. But it didn't, she said. He glanced at her. No, he agreed. Quiet pause. Then he reached for her hand. She didn't hesitate. Their fingers intertwined naturally, like they had always belonged that way. Do you ever wonder, he said, what would have happened if you didn't come that night? Amara thought about it, then shook her head. No, she said. He raised an eyebrow. Slightly. Why not? She looked at him because she understood something now. Because I did, she said, and that was enough. The river flowed quietly beside them, unbothered, unchanging, but somehow it had changed everything. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in gold and fire, Amara leaned slightly against him. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't thinking about survival or tomorrow or what could go wrong. She was simply peace. The girl no one chose had been chosen by life itself, by love, by destiny. And this time she wasn't just surviving, she was living happily, completely, forever. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to this channel and tell us where you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.